In today's show, Scoot Henderson looks a lot better in losses to the Clippers and Nuggets. Plus, when the Blazers go super young against Denver, the future is, well, it's soon for sure. Welcome, Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. Listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, so make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, talking about a couple of games the Blazers played over the weekend, losses to the Los Angeles Clippers and the Denver Nuggets. Scoot Henderson played his best game since returning from injury, particularly on Friday evening against the Clippers. I thought that was one of his best games in a while, and then he played solid in a shorthanded loss to the Denver Nuggets on Saturday. We'll talk a lot about Scoot in this one. On Saturday evening, the Blazers did something that's only been done one other time in modern NBA history. They started 5 rookies. The future is soon. Let's talk about that. We'll talk about that to close the show. The future and kind of what I mean when I say the future is soon, because I don't think the future is necessarily now. I guess it's always the present. That's how now works. Let's do what we do, though. Fastest recap in the West for a couple games. We are going to fly through these. Blazers on Friday evening played the second of 2 games against the Clippers. About 1 p.m. on Friday afternoon, DeAndre Ayton shows up on the injury report with left elbow tendonitis and is eventually ruled out for the game, meaning that Duop Reith is going to get the start. He's your starting center alongside Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, Anthony Simons, and Scoot Henderson. Blazers They got handled by the Clippers on Wednesday evening, and they got handled again on Friday, down 15 after 1, down 17 after 2, down 21 heading into the fourth quarter, swelled to as many as 24 there in the fourth, 26 there in the fourth, and then with the Clippers bench in, the Blazers made a run. They made a push to get it kind of close, and they lose 125-117. Scoot Henderson at 24-10 in this game. The big news, though, with about 7 minutes left, about 7:05 mark of the third quarter, Anthony Simons limps back out of the game and to the locker room and would not return. He would not play on Saturday evening, ruled out for that game as well. Simons has been on the injury report. He missed a game against the Knicks, and he's been on the injury report with left knee tendonitis. And so he comes back. He's had some, even since he's been on the injury report. He's even had a good game while dealing with this knee issue. But he comes out, plays in this game, and then he was on the injury report for the first Clippers game and plays. He's on the injury report for the second one and plays. And then I didn't see if there was an acute moment, but the limp looked like, oh man, I'm hurt type of limp, and he obviously didn't play again. You're going to be really, really conservative with knee injuries, really careful with Anthony Simons and that type of thing. And even if it's just like soreness, like I'm not enough of a doctor. I'm not at all a doctor to know what tendonitis exactly means in your left knee, but like they're going to be cautious with him, and so he's. There's no timeline on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he misses. The Blazers are about to head out on like a 2-week road trip, and I think they will be very cautious with bringing Anthony Simons back. I would not be surprised. As I'm recording this on Sunday morning, you're listening to Monday, March 25th show. I appreciate you, but as I'm recording this on Sunday morning, no official word on Anthony Simons' availability, although I would be surprised if he comes back in the immediate future, although anything is possible. But that's the big deal from this one. I mean, Scoot played well, but the Clippers, they got some stars, and their stars played like stars. Terrence Mann returned, and he played pretty well, and the Blazers lose by 8, 125-117 on Friday. That was Friday. On Saturday, Blazers do something very unique. Actually, unique doesn't really have degrees. They do something unique. It's only happened one other time since 1970 in the NBA. They roll out a 5-rookie starting lineup against the Nuggets. The Nuggets are playing without Nikola Jokic and without Jamal Murray. The Nuggets, like, they don't have a ton of depth. What they do have is like a perfect starting lineup. When they're healthy, their starting 5 makes like perfect sense, and they have like just enough depth pieces to make you think like they're going to win a second championship, because the starting 5 is like perfectly conceived. When they're shorthanded, like this team doesn't, this team starts DeAndre Jordan at center in 2024. But even then, the Blazers, with as shorthanded as they were, there's no DeAndre Ayton in this game, no Anthony Simons in this game, still no Jeremy Grant, although he's apparently getting closer to returning based on his injury designation, and no Matisse Thybulle in this one. The Blazers were not favored at home, despite the shorthanded nature of their opponents. And the Blazers rolled out a group of 5, all 5 rookies. Scoot Henderson, Ryan Rupert, Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, and Duop Reith. Just the second time since 1970 this has happened in the league. The Golden State Warriors did it at the very end of the 2012 season during an epic tank run to acquire Harrison Barnes, who eventually wouldn't be part of a championship team and the 73-win team, and like, I'll say it, worth it. Obviously worth it. But like during an epic tank run, they started 5 rookies. Blazers, I don't think this is an epic tank run. Like, let me speak on this real quick. I think there are 2 things happening. The Blazers are weird with injuries, and I think that works against them. They don't provide a ton of information. They're a really low information team. They don't provide updates. They don't provide timelines. Even when they do provide some updates, it's like it's just a word salad that means nothing. And also they've like straight up faked injuries each of the last 2 years in order to lose games on purpose. So they don't have a lot of benefit of the doubt. So it's like DeAndre Ayton kind of shows up on the injury report out of nowhere, and it's like, ooh, is this fake? And then Anthony Simons leaves a game early, and it's like, oh, they rushed him back. It's like it's happening in both directions with Blazers injury stuff. I don't think any of these injuries are the like sort of classic fake, whatever tendinopathy was like the classic fake one they had a couple years ago. I think these are just like guys are banged up this time of year, and the Blazers are being particularly conservative, unless they aren't being conservative in Ant's case, and he wants to play and they want to play him, and he ends up limping out of the game. But in any case, Blazers, 5 rookies against the Denver Nuggets, hung in the game for the most part. Down 4 after 1, down 10 at halftime, but at halftime they had 0 of 12 from 3. You don't make a 3-pointer. It's going to be hard, even against a shorthanded Nuggets team. It's just going to be hard to be in the game. But only down 10 after going over 12 from 3. They hit 6 threes in the third quarter. That just saved their bacon. Everybody got in the act. Chris Murray hit 1. Scoot Henderson hit 1. Jabari Walker hit 1. Toumani Camara hit 1. Duop Reith hit 1, or hit 2 rather. Delano Banton hit 1. Actually, I think Scoot did not hit 1, but the other guys did. The other youngsters did. And all of a sudden, 6 of 8 from 3. It's a 2-point game, and when Scoot Henderson does hit a 3, that's what I'm thinking of. With 9 minutes and 1 second left in the game, the Blazers take a 2-point lead, 91-89, with 9 minutes left against the shorthanded defending champs. Denver responds immediately. Aaron Gordon gets a dunk. Nuggets rip off a 9-0 run to put themselves up 7, and they kind of just held the Blazers at stiff arm's length from there. Portland, thanks to some missed free throws, splitting free throws at the end, did get close in the closing seconds of the game, but never had the ball with a real shot, and they lose 114-111. That's your fastest recap in the West. Let's talk about Scoot Henderson. He had a nice little weekend. He had a nice Friday night, a nice Saturday night, particularly Friday evening. I thought he played well. He finished with 22 points and 6 assists against Denver. That's, back-to-back solid games. You go with 24 and 10 and then 22 and 6. I think this is kind of the Scoot Henderson I expected to some extent. Let's talk about expectations and what we saw from him in that second segment. But first, I want to tell you about the good folks over at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you got a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, a no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with that 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer. Today's show is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether it's superchargers or roof racks or exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right. So let's talk about Scoot. In a lot of ways, Scoot Henderson is the person I've talked about most all season long on this podcast because he's the most important person in the franchise. It is a weird thing to bestow upon a teenage rookie like that, but the Blazers, I think the framing it as chose Scoot over Dame is incorrect. What they did was they chose to keep the third overall pick, regardless of who they took. If they took freaking Amen Thompson, they would have been choosing. If they took a center, they would have been choosing to keep the pick over Damian Lillard. But what they did do is they invested a third overall pick in a young player when they had a sort of pivot point moment in the franchise. What are we going to do next? What is the next version of this team going to look like? We're keeping this draft pick and we're building with this. I think I made the case pretty often over the summer that I think once they had a top 3 pick, they absolutely had to take it and they absolutely had to move forward. But I feel like I have been really, really kind of lasered in on Scoot. But I've been lasered in on Scoot. That's like an Adrian Wojnarowski word. They've got a laser. I think I've been specifically focused on Scoot's development because the Blazers, when you take someone third overall, you expect them to blossom into a really good player. And Scoot Henderson struggles right out of the gate. We're certainly a surprise to the franchise. They didn't start him on day one because they thought he was going to be a slow learner. They started him on day one because they thought he was going to be ahead of schedule. He wasn't. They had to kind of change up what he became. He was starting to sort of get his rhythm prior to the All-Star break. Then he comes out of the All-Star break and he's injured and misses 5 games. And he's come back and he's struggled. Like he looks like a teenager playing in the league, and not like a teenager that's going to be a really good player in the league, but just like a teenager struggling in the league. But the last 2 nights have been the most promising since Scoot returned from injury after the All-Star break. Absolutely, Friday evening against the Clippers, I think, was the best game he has played since returning from injury. Obviously, it was it came with some bumps along the way. Like he's not having hyper efficient shooting nights. In fact, he goes against the Clippers. He has this big game, 24 points, 8 of 18 from the field. Like he's still in this game shot 5 of 12 on 2-pointers, right? But and then he follows it up the next night, and he goes 9 of 20 and he scores 22 points. Like and again in this game, like he's 7 of 16 from 2. Like he's still shooting. He's not. These aren't hyper efficient nights. But in a lot of ways, this is what I expected from Scoot Henderson. If this had been who he was all year, a guy who is inefficient but puts up good box score numbers, it wouldn't be a thing, right? The problem was the hyper inefficiency and the lack of box score numbers. I think coming into the season, and you can go check the tapes on this one, I predicted he would average something like 17 and 6, but shoot 40% from the field. He's not quite at 40% from the field. He's not quite at 17 and 6. Like he's a 12 and 5, and he'll probably end up a little higher than that because he can get more minutes down the stretch. But he's like a 12 and 5 shooting 37%. It's like he's struggled. But I think you saw the outline on Friday evening about what he can be. I think he did a good job getting to his spots, and I think I've had this conversation with a friend, and he says that he's not a listener, so no shout outs for you. But he says he's just a basketball fan we were talking about this. And he says that he's not worried about Scoot because he feels like Scoot gets to his spots. I'm not sure I think that. I think Scoot does a good job he's done a better job, particularly in his last 2 games, of using his deceleration. So he uses his burst to get his first step sort of past someone or shoulders past someone, and then decelerating to slow down when you get to the rim and kind of get shots up. But I think if Scoot got to his spots more, he wouldn't have some of the struggles he has. I feel like he gets 85% of the way and then he's missing that sort of explosive element at the rim that I thought he would have. I thought we just have more highlights of Scoot. We haven't had those. But I think against the Clippers, he did a good job of attacking, good job of facilitating. A lot of his passes against the Clippers, like he finished with 10 assists, but I think a lot of his assists were just like making the smart pass quickly. He on Saturday against the Nuggets, he threw a bounce pass where he was behind half court or right at half court and hit Chris Murray in stride through 3 defenders, right under the foul line for an easy layup on the break. Like it was a dime. It was a pass, but like. The best passes, maybe like the most fun passes are obviously highlight passes. Those are great. But some of the best passes Scoot makes aren't even for assists. They're just like drive and skip it quickly because you get the defense off balance and you move the ball quickly. And some of his assists are just because he makes the simple read quickly. It's like I come off a screen, the help is there, or they're sagging way off me. And so that means if I do attack that space and then kick, my guy's going to have a better angle, or just like push it quickly, and he did this a couple times. Push it quickly, and okay, the defense isn't set. Jabari Walker has a lane. Oh, the defense isn't set. Chris Murray has a shot. The defense isn't set. We're gonna get a simple drive for Tumani if I just get him the ball hit ahead quickly. Simple passes, like when you box score scout and you say like 10 assists, he was carving them up. No, he was just making the right read a bunch, and I think he did a nice job of that, just making the right read. And I think that's what is an improvement for him from beginning of the year. I think he gets to the rim okay. Obviously, finishing is a big challenge for him. And I think some of his finishing issues are because he's not respected as a jump shooter. And when he's not respected as a jump shooter, his defender is back in the paint. It means you're driving into the paint against more bodies as opposed to having someone press up on you. And you can just say, I'm going to get past you. And then the help's going to come and I'm going to be able to read the help defender. Because he isn't respected as a jump shooter, it makes driving harder. And when he gets to the rim, he's not very good at finishing. But I thought he did a better job against the Clippers of mostly getting to his right hand, his preferred right hand. He had one twisting around Daniel Tice where he finished with his right hand when he could have just made a left-handed layup, but he doesn't operate that way. And another one where he twisted around Zubac where he could have just like put a little quick lefty push shot in, but he got fouled, made the free throws, was fine. But like 2 instances against the Clippers where it's like, if he wasn't super, super right-handed, it'd be easier. I think if you look at his shot chart, right, it's like when he takes shots in his areas, he's better. And that area right below the foul line, he has good touch from. And he seems to shoot better from the top of the key as opposed to the wings on threes. But and typically, just like the way the NBA works, point guards don't get corner shots. That's like, there's some studies a couple years ago about playing the position you play indicates often where you end up shooting from because it's where you stand on the court. It's pretty interesting stuff. And I think getting Scoot a true corner 3 looks, which are the easiest shots on the court, would probably require someone who's like a really capable lead guard out there in front of him. And I think Anthony Simons can kind of be that, but that's just not how they use him all the time. In general, I thought the Scoot's games against the Clippers and then against Denver were promising games headed in the right direction, and he just needed games where it felt like he was headed in the right direction. I don't want to I'm not screaming, he's back! In fact, if you're watching YouTube, I'm the title of the second bullet here is Scoot bouncing back, and I don't even think he's bouncing back. I think he's moving forward in the way that you want him to move forward. He needed some positive games. I think the Clippers game was a legitimately positive game, and I think the Nuggets game, he wasn't as excuse me, he wasn't as strong, but he was solid in that game as well. And that's what they need from him, particularly if Anfernee Simons is going to miss time. You just got to get Scoot out there to go do stuff and kind of let him fail and let him figure it out. I think there's a part early in the season where it makes sense to kind of shield him from failures a little bit and say like, okay, you're going to play a little bit less because like just having you go out there and stink it up is a problem. It's not that time anymore. I want him, and I'm glad they're committed to it now that he's healthy and off the injury report. Just like, give him the reins and let him figure it out, because you can see him figuring it out a little better. Like the simple passing stuff is figuring out a little bit better. His ability to push in transition and make decisions in transition is a little bit better. His ability to, like, I think, and your mileage may vary because I had this argument literally, 55 hours ago, is like, I think he's getting closer to being able to get to his spots all the way and having an understanding of where he wants to go. He's not all the way getting there, but he's doing a much better job of not getting caught in between and taking really hard leaning jump shots or taking, floaters where he's not getting his balance under him. And I think he's done a better job of getting to where he wants to mostly go and trying to get to his more dominant right hand. And I think you have these games 24-10 and then 22-5, was it? 22-6. I shorted him. I'm sorry, Scoot. That's what you want to see from him, regardless of the shooting. Just like go take the reins of the offense, make some decisions, get yourself into the paint. He shot decent in these games, like 5 of 10 from 3. One of those threes he banked in, and a couple of them came in late garbagey time against the Clippers. So like, I don't want to say like he's really shooting well, but if Scoot can make threes, it opens up the drive. If Scoot can decelerate and get himself better shots because he slows down, it kind of mitigates some of his like lack of true explosiveness at the rim. You're starting to see him develop counters and develop. I think one of the challenges with him early in the season was that he would decide, I'm going to do this, and nothing was going to sway that decision. I'm going to drive right and I'm going to get there. I'm going to get around this dude and I'm going to get baseline and I'm going to make my little reverse layup. I think he's starting to be able to make the second and third decisions on the move at full speed, and the second and third decisions while shifting from 1,000 miles an hour to down to 17, down to school zone. And being able to drive in the school zone, being able to beat people in slow motion is really a great skill for point guards, particularly who is as physical as him. Defensively, he's pretty physical. I think he fouls a little bit too much, but I would rather have Scoot foul too much than not be active. Sometimes the fouls are 70 feet from the rim in the backcourt, and it's like, don't do that. But in general, I think these are 2 positive games from Scoot Henderson, and you want to see him keep building on it because he hadn't had a lot of positive games. And so, while I didn't come away from this weekend thinking like Scoot is going to be great, I came away thinking from like, oh, good. He's like, there are better days ahead for Scoot because he's looking like he's building on some of his struggles coming out of the All-Star break. And it was like, you want the graph at least to be flat as opposed to heading the wrong direction. Speaking of stars and the Blazers, coming out with 5 rookies against the Denver Nuggets. And it is a cliched thing to say the future was on display against Denver. I don't know if I think that. I think that it gave me more questions about what the future might be, and what the Blazers have for their future, I think, is an interesting question worth answering. Let's talk about what we saw, and the future is soon for the Blazers, to be sure. Let's talk about that to close the show. First, let's talk PrizePicks. Is daily fantasy made easy? It's the number 1 fantasy sports app. There's over 3 million members already using PrizePicks because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more or pick less. That's it. More than or less than on a 2 to 6 player entry. It's just you versus the stat projections set by PrizePicks. You win, you get some money. And right now, they got a fun way to play. It's demon time over at PrizePicks. Win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. It's Demons and Goblins, the newest and most exciting way to play over on PrizePicks. Squares that are marked with the red demons or the green goblins give you different payouts, so you can win up to 100 times your money. Like I said, up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the promo code LockedOnNBA. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. And you can use the promo code LockedOnNBA and they will match you on your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Put in $10, they'll give you $10. Put in $20, they'll give you a match with $20. $50, they'll match you with $50. You get the idea. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. The promo code is LockedOnNBA. That's PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. There was a time in my professional life I've been covering the NBA as I've been covering the NBA as a credentialed media member for a decade in various roles. I've written for a newspaper, written for websites, done some local regional television, and hosted this here podcast. There was a time, though, I've actually been... At one point when I worked at the Oregonian, it was back in the day when there were big budgets at newspapers. I was the 8th guy on the beat. Eight. There's not even 8 people in the sports department anymore. I mean, there are, but barely. I was the 8th guy on the beat. But at one point I was third, and I would get third choice on stories. In a couple different roles. I've been third in a couple different roles. I've been second. Now, my own podcast, baby. Number one. You know who's making the decisions? Me. I get the first pick of the good stories. But in any case, when I was the third on the beat, I'd have to scrounge a little bit, and I was hearkened back to that. Scrounge, like, for what story am I going to write today? And I was hearkened back for that when the Blazers trotted out 5 rookies in their starting lineup, because it's like, I will write, after whoever writes the Gamer and whoever writes the second story on the play of Scoot Henderson, I'll write about how the Blazers, their future was on display against the Nuggets. And that is the type of cliche that I would have just pitched on deadline to an editor, and they would have said, yeah, great. But on this here podcast, I get a little more space to think about things, and I get to be a little bit more honest about my feelings because the microphone allows me a little more space for honesty. I don't think the Blazers' future was on display, unless you're talking about the future of their role players. I think one of the interesting parts about this season for the Blazers is, like, they don't have any foundational star level pieces, but they have discovered some really intriguing role players. And I think the distinction here I'm making, because I think some people get maybe push back a little bit when I say the Blazers have only discovered role players, and I describe, some of their guys as role players. I think star players have star player skills, like being able to create their own offense by themselves off the dribble. I'm not sure the Blazers have that with Toumani Camara or Jabari Walker or Duop Reith, but and not every player who can dribble and get and score on their own is a star. See Delano Banton, but, like, there are star skills and then there are role player skills. Role players you could be the third best player in your team without star skills. You could be an excellent cog on a team that wins a whole bunch of games by being an elite role player. It's just like you can't build the thing around what Toumani Camara does. But I think he's going to be good. And when I say the future was on display, I am struck by this sort of question that I'm asking myself, and I don't have an answer, but I'm going to ask it. I'm going to ask it here, pose it here, and then, like, let you sort of ruminate on this, because we'll talk about this for months. How many players are currently on the Blazers roster that can be on the Blazers roster when they get good again? I think if you ask fans of the team right now, there's some of them that say trade everyone, blow it up, because there's fans that say that about every iteration of the Blazers for always. But I think there is a strong majority of, not a strong majority, but I think there is a majority of fans who, like, say, I like all the players on the team right now. Like, I understand they need to get better and need to improve, but, like, there are 6, 7, 8 guys that I would like them to hold on to because I like their potential. And I think that's the real truth of what was on display against the Nuggets. Toumani Camara finished with 11-7 against the Clippers, and then he bounced back, or then he had it bounce back. Then he had 16 points, 7 boards, and 6 dimes. Career high 6 times against Denver. That Clippers game, 11-7, he was solid, but I thought he played pretty, like, aggressive and fun defense. And then that he just filled out the box score, 16, 7, and 6 with a block and a steal. A lot of his passes are just keep it moving, drive and kick passes. He had one tip out on an offensive rebound because he's a really aggressive offensive rebounder, and Chauncey Billups lets him crash basically at all times. And he had a tip out to Duop Reith for a 3 in the fourth quarter, and he had a really nice feed inside to Delano Banton. But for the most part, his passes are just like making the right read off of drives or kickouts, or just like really, he's not like this high level passer, but he keeps the ball moving. He's a decent slasher off the wing, and he's a really good defensive player. He's going to be part of he's going to be an effective NBA player just because of those skills. Jabari Walker is like, I think he's established himself as like not a wing, but more of a big. Like he's an undersized he's a 4-5 as opposed to a 3-4. I thought he was a 3-4. Probably said as much on the podcast that he was more 3 than 5. Watching him more this year, I think he's established himself as more 5 than 3. He's probably a power forward for the most part. That's kind of where he fits in. But he's a role player who helps with his defense, his timely cutting. He's a really good rebounder. He plays hard as heck. Like he's, his offense might hold him back a little bit, but I think he's got some stuff. Duop Reath in this game. He was so freaking good against Denver. The reason the Blazers were in this game is because Duop Reath had 24 points, 8 boards. He had 3 threes, and what he really did was he leveraged how much they're worried about him shooting, because he took 6 3-pointers in the game, 3 of 6 from 3, is they're worried about him shooting to beat guys off the dribble, and at his size, to be able to take the ball from the 3-point line, show a pump fake, and then beat people off the dribble. It's why I think I've compared him favorably to Naz Reid, who's someone his size who has a handle. Naz Reid, more athletic and a better handle, but like Duop's ability to put the ball on the deck and score is a really intriguing thing. He struggles a lot on defense, but he's a really intriguing offensive player. Between Tumani and Jabari and Duop, I think the Blazers have a really intriguing group of role players. That's a really intriguing group of role players. You can't build the plane out of role players. I think Chris Murray, if he ever figures it out on offense, does enough positive stuff to be a long-term pro, already defends in a smart way. He has a really good sense of how to cut. He's not this like high level playmaker, but he totally understands how to make plays. Him and Jabari Walker are similar in that vein, where neither of them are great passers. I think Chris a little better, but like both of them can read a defense and understand the decisions that need to be made, even if they can't physically make the high level passes just yet. I think Delano Banton, for my money, he's just a lot of his best games have become because of volume, and I don't think on a good team he'll ever have the volume again. So where he fits as a low-volume scorer is a really intriguing skill set, but a low-volume scorer, because most of his value is going to be on offense, I'm not sure where he plugs in. But if you look at Tumani and Jabari and Duop, and then like a slight step below Chris, because I'm a little worried about his offensive production right now, the Blazers have really intriguing role players. The future is soon, and by that, I mean at some point, you're going to have to make a decision about which of those guys is part of the core going forward. Which do you trade to upgrade if you go that route, and who gets a second contract and all of those things, right? Eventually, you're going to have to do that. And the Blazers are still in the market, and they need to be searching for it until they absolutely get it. Just for a player who is a bona fide star to build around. Perhaps that's Shaedon Sharpe, but we just don't know yet. And that's one of the most difficult parts of the season. I think it's pretty clear it's not Avery Simons. Certainly not. It doesn't look like it's Scoot Henderson right now, although he has some serious franchise investment in him. But what I came away thinking after this Denver game is that the Blazers have, if nothing else this year, discovered a trio, maybe a quartet of useful role players. And if they were a good team, those are dudes who are going to really help on a good team. And if the Blazers can add talent, they've got those complementary parts that are going to get, usually with role players, if you play with better players, they make your life easier, and then your job is because your job is easier, you look better. All of those guys are solid role players and could help on a team that has a little more talent. And I think there is something to be said for that, finding those really solid plug and play type of role players. Why the future isn't now? Because you can't build forward until you have that foundational piece, and the Blazers don't have that foundational piece, but the future is soon. And those gentlemen, Tumani, Jabari, and Duop, and Chris, those are guys who are going to be part of the future probably, unless they have to make tough decisions this summer, because that's how it works, or because the timeline gets extended, and the nature of the league is that there's a ton of roster churn, and that the next time the Blazers are like a truly good team, the likelihood that more than 3 guys that are currently on the roster now will still be on the roster then is relatively low, because that's just the nature of the beast. But if the Blazers do find a way to accelerate it, if they really nail a draft pick this summer, or they make a trade for a young veteran that really changes their outcome, they have some useful role players who will be able to scale up, and as long as they aren't asked to do too much, can play a role on high-level teams because of what they bring to the table. I think Tumani would be good on basically any team, particularly a team that doesn't need him too much on offense. I think Diop is a really interesting backup center just because of his offensive package. Jabari Walker and Chris Murray are probably offensive arsenal away from being true impact players, but they look like they do enough other good stuff to be long-term NBA players. You build some role player, you got some role players in the mix, you're going to have a chance. The Blazers need a foundational piece. That's why we talked so much about Scoot in segment number 2. They got to find it, but they found a lot of complementary parts. And I think if there's a good part about this season, is that they have been successfully found role players and high-level role players. The next step is going to be the biggest, most challenging one. That is going to do it for today's show. Come back next week, 5 days a week, wherever you get podcast. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.